The Great Pyramid of Giza is undoubtedly the most famous architectural wonder of the ancient world. Easily recognizable by its perfect geometric shape and massive scale, the Great Pyramid is a symbol that has survived, for now we assume, for more than 4,500 years. For nearly 4 millennia, the pyramid has held the record for the tallest man-made structure and is the only surviving wonder of the original 7 wonders of the ancient world. It is normal to expect Khufu, or Cheops, as he would later be known to the ancient Greeks, to have been a popular, well-documented pharaoh whose reign was recorded in detail by modern scribes and preserved in lavish inscriptions throughout Egypt. Yet it was he who commissioned the building of the Great Pyramid. But the reality is quite different. Paradoxical as it may sound, Khufu is perhaps one of the most enigmatic pharaohs of all time, due to the fact that almost nothing has remained written about him. Apart from the building of the Great Pyramid, we have almost no other information to tell us more about who he was. Some sources describe him as a cruel, capricious ruler who enslaved thousands just to build a monument to his own ego. Others disagree, pointing to solid evidence that suggests he was not only a competent ruler, but beloved by his people. Moreover, Khufu ruled during the 4th dynasty, the so-called Golden Age of the Old Kingdom, one of the most prosperous and peaceful periods in the entire history of ancient Egypt. So the big question is, who and what was Khufu? A ruthless tyrant, a far-sighted and wise ruler, or something else entirely, whose true nature and history are forever lost in time, distorted by secondary sources and centuries of conjecture. In 1903, the English Egyptologist Sir William Matthew Flinders Petrie discovered an extremely important artifact at Abydos, Egypt, a small ivory statuette, slightly larger than the size of a matchbox, that depicts Pharaoh Khufu. The discovery is of great significance as it is the only 3-dimensional depiction of the great pharaoh. All else we have are written references, cartouches or fragments of statues without any detail. The figurine has been successfully restored to its almost authentic state. Interestingly, it is the smallest known Egyptian figurine ever found, which is ironic considering that the man depicted on it built ancient Egypt's largest monument. At first, historians assumed the statuette was made during the time of Khufu himself. Recently, however, Egyptologists such as Zahi Hawass have taken a different view, believing that it was created 2,000 years later. The artistic style, the choice of materials and the manner of manufacture suggest a much later origin somewhere around the 26th dynasty rather than around the 4th. Furthermore, the statuette may have been a copy of a much larger statue that has now been lost in time. While the find is of great significance, it simply shows us how little we know about Khufu. To be fair, most Old Kingdom pharaohs, including Khufu, his son Khephren, and his grandson Menkaure, did not actually leave behind detailed written sources or detailed images that have survived the centuries. Therefore, the mere existence of a few artifacts preserved to this day is considered a true miracle. What we know about Khufu comes from a few scattered sources, most notably the inscriptions in his Giza necropolis, later documents such as the Papyrus of Weskar, which we told you about in a previous video on the channel, archaeological evidence, and the writings of ancient Greek, Roman, and Egyptian historians. Combined, they create an intriguing portrait of this enigmatic ancient ruler. Khufu ruled sometime in the 20th century BC. Traditionally, he is assumed to have been the son of Pharaoh Snofru and Queen Hetepheres I, or so it has long been thought. Although Khufu did succeed Snofru as the second pharaoh of the 4th dynasty, recent studies of Khufu's life indicate that Snofru may have been only his stepfather, not his biological one. This stemmed from the fact that Hetepheres I did not have the title Hemet Nesut, meaning wife of the king. Instead, she had Mut Nesut and Satnetjer Hetep, meaning mother of the king and daughter of his divine body, respectively. It is for this reason that some historians suggest that in order to make Khufu a legitimate heir, Snofru may have declared that Hetepheres IV was the daughter of a living god, thus making him a legitimate heir. This theory is supported by the fact that Hetepheres I is buried closer to Khufu than to her husband Snofru. But for the present, there is no conclusive evidence to confirm this hypothesis. Khufu's predecessor, Snofru, enjoyed quite a popularity among later generations. Unlike many other pharaohs whose reign was unstable or whose memory was deliberately erased by usurpers, Snofru was considered a good and benevolent ruler. It was he who began the pyramid revolution, moving from the stepped structures of previous dynasties to pyramids with smooth sides. But of course, Khufu went even further, building a pyramid of such proportions that it was never surpassed even by his successors. According to available historical sources, Khufu had at least 14 children and between 2 and 4 wives, depending on the source. Of his 14 children, 2 became pharaohs, Djedefre and Khephren. Djedefre was the first to inherit the throne, but his reign was interrupted for unknown reasons. His brother Khephren succeeded him. Like his father, Khephren built a huge pyramid, second in size only to his father's. This is the pyramid that you can see in the middle of the complex, though slightly lower than the Great Pyramid. Eventually, Khephen's son and successor, Menkaure, also built his own pyramid, the smallest of the 3 we often see in photos of the Giza complex. Menkaure's pyramid was never completed. However, along with those of his father, grandfather and great-grandfather, it forms the Giza necropolis, located adjacent to Egypt's present-day capital, Cairo. According to popular legend, Khufu used thousands of slaves to build the pyramid. But how true is this? According to recent discoveries, apparently not very. The story of how Khufu forced 100,000 slaves to build the huge pyramid is probably a rumor spread by later writers and historians. The main source for this story is the Greek historian Herodotus. According to him, Khufu, or Cheops as he called him, was a tyrannical ruler, so evil that he forced thousands of poor, malnourished and exhausted slaves to work without mercy. But the most horrifying thing, according to Herodotus, was that Khufu had the audacity to sell his own daughter to rich men to finance the construction. According to him, Khufu and his successors reigned for more than a century, plunging Egypt into suffering and despair, which only ended when the new dynasty took power. But how much truth is there in this? Most likely, not much. The truth is that many of these stories are the product of bad reputations passed down through generations. For example, the famous story about Khufu's daughter and the claim that he used slaves in construction turns out to be exaggerated. Archaeological evidence shows that the workers on the pyramid were not slaves, but rather seasonally employed laborers gathered from all over Egypt. These people were well fed, divided into shifts, and housed in worker settlements near the pyramids. Graves have even been found for some of them, with respectful burials and signs of treatment, suggesting that their labor was valued and revered. In other words, a great exaggeration. But Herodotus was clearly prone to dramatization. Apparently, however, other Greek and Roman historians thought the same of Khufu, including Diodorus of Sicily, who claimed that Khufu was hated by his people. Even the Egyptian Manetho, a priest and historian of a later period, noted that Khufu, the one credited with building the pyramids, received the contempt of the gods. To be fair to history, not everything written by Herodotus and Diodorus is devoid of truth. For example, Herodotus was surprisingly accurate about the scale of the project and the human resources required. And Diodorus mentions the pyramid's beautiful white facing, as well as its golden top, the pyramidion, which by his time had already disappeared. To this day, however, no one can say for sure what happened to it. When the Arabs conquered Egypt in 642 AD, they began searching for explanations as to who built the pyramids and how. Unfortunately, by that time, none of the local population could read hieroglyphics, so the new conquerors were forced to make up their own theories. Fast forward to the 19th century, when more serious archaeological excavations began in the Giza necropolis. But even then, the negative image of Khufu persisted. Only in the last 100 years have scholars begun to question Herodotus's claims. So who do we ask? Hardly anyone can give us better information about Khufu's image than the people who lived in his time, or at least a little closer to it. Like Snofru, Khufu enjoyed some popularity among the ancient Egyptians even after his death. In fact, at the end of the 6th dynasty, Khufu had 67 priests dedicated to his cult and 6 independent high officials serving his necropolis, the largest number recorded for a pharaoh of his time. This speaks to the lasting reverence for his person. The most detailed text on Khufu is in the Westcar Papyrus, though written some 850 years after his death. The papyrus contains a collection of accounts of Old Kingdom pharaohs, including Khufu. In it, he is portrayed as a complex figure, both stern and fair. Though probably fictional, this account presents Khufu not as a two-dimensional tyrant building a pyramid for the sake of his ego, but as an intelligent and inquisitive ruler capable of rigorous but sound judgment. During his reign, Khufu began construction of the pyramid complex at Giza. The Great Pyramid itself was completed within 2 decades with the help of 100,000 workers who began the project as soon as he took the throne. His nephew Hemiunu was both architect and construction manager. The pyramid itself is made up of about 2,300,000 blocks made of limestone, granite, and mortar. Even more impressive is that the largest granite blocks weigh between 25 and 80 tons each. In its golden days, the pyramid looked nothing like we see it today. It was covered with a shining veneer of white limestone that reflected the sun and made the whole structure shine like a radiant hill, as some ancient texts describe it. Unfortunately, centuries of weathering, erosion, and looting have taken away the once magnificent outer shell of the pyramid, leaving the inner structure we see today. It has even been claimed, as mentioned before, that there was a glittering pyramidion at the very top, made of precious metals such as gold and silver. After his death, Khufu was to be laid to rest in the Great Pyramid. Or so it was believed. Because although the pyramid contains the traditional king's chamber with a large granite sarcophagus inside, his remains have never been found there. Did Khufu really build the pyramid? The search for Khufu's remains continues to this day. Despite numerous efforts, from careful excavation to thermal scans, the actual chamber in which Khufu is found remains elusive. Even after his death, he is as enigmatic as he was in life. Some believe that he may not have actually built the pyramid, and that it was constructed much, much earlier than his time, with several theorists suggesting that it was a pre-flood structure. While there is no definitive evidence to support these claims, so far all existing evidence points to the pyramid being built during Khufu's time. Inscriptions left by workers inside the pyramid mentioning Khufu's name, Merer's diary detailing how the pyramid was built, and the many ancient texts that confirm this fact all point to one thing. Khufu was the builder and commissioner of this miracle. Setting aside the debate over who built the pyramids, Khufu himself remains an enigma. Did he create the pyramid for another purpose? Where are his remains if not in the pyramid? And how did he manage to carry out the largest project in the history of ancient Egypt, using technology that none of us have yet been able to understand? Perhaps we never will, or not quite. Recently, just beneath this complex, and more specifically beneath the Pyramid of Khephren, were discovered underground labyrinths and strange spiraling structures descending up to 2 kilometers deep. You can learn more about this sensational and latest discovery in the video you see on the left.